All right, so this is my wrap up for the month of August. Everything that I read, both physically and audiobook wise, and I think just it's going to be stronger when it comes to Audible or audiobooks every single time. Just because the nature of it, I think it's a lot easier to get through a lot of books that way. At least for me, I've seen some people like Mike's book reviews talk about it, where he just can't get through audiobooks. I can do both pretty easily, and when it came to audiobooks, I'll go through this first. It really was mostly all of He Who Fights with Monsters. I finished five of those books. I finished four, started the fifth one, got about halfway through before putting it away and kind of taking a break for I think a good little while. And I liked it. I thought it was really good in a lot of other ways that I wasn't really expecting. But when it came to book five, what really threw me off of the series, or at least made me want to take a break, is that the books had been getting progressively more and more dramatic. And given the whole lit RPG tone, it was something that I expected, but it was also something that I really wasn't looking forward to. I liked the tone of the first three books, but with books four and five especially, it just got very dramatic. In book five, I think it got to the point where it was just melodramatic, way too just he was, I don't want to say depressed all the time, and that's a bad thing, but he was just so down all the time despite his situation. I guess you could say getting better in certain ways, but then having to go through all these difficult situations and traumatic events. But it got to the point where an event happened in book five where, uh, let's just say, it got a lot worse for Jason, and I just could not look forward to seeing him whine about it for the rest of the book. I know that that was the direction, or at least I'm pretty sure that's the direction where that was going, and I just kind of checked out at that point. And I need to take a break, and I may come back to it in a couple of months or maybe a year or two, and we'll see if I can pick up where I left off. And then I also switched from that to Dungeon Crawler Carl. I started the first book and I really liked it. But I do think that just going from one lit RPG to another was kind of a mistake. And I definitely think that after I finish Dungeon Crawler Carl, the first book, I think I'm going to take a little bit of a break from that entire genre and just move to something else entirely different. I think I might do something general history based, at least when it comes to ancient history, to kind of refresh myself. I listen to a lot of podcasts on the Marquis de Lafayette, and I think that that might be the direction where I go, where I pick up a book based on him. I have one that I want to read by Mike Duncan, but there's a more general American Revolutionary history where I do want to get a little bit into that. But that's everything when it comes to audiobooks. Like I said, it was pretty much just He Who Fights with Monsters, and that was the entirety of my audiobook listens. And I do want to do more stuff outside of Audible because of all that stuff that happened. So I think I'll go back to Libro FM, resume Lord of the Rings next month because those audiobooks are really good. I still think The Hobbit, it goes The Two Towers, The Hobbit, and then Fellowship for me. I'm going to do Return of the King, I think, next, or that's all that is. So I'll do Return of the King next and just see how I feel about the books in general. And I might read them like physically sometime after that. I'll have to give it a little bit of a break, of course. But physical reading, I did not finish this one, but Dune Messiah, I have been reading this one for a while. I think I talked about it a couple months ago as like I was currently reading it. And I like the book a lot. I've enjoyed it thoroughly. Not as much as I liked Dune, the first book, but I have still enjoyed this book. And I think the issue that I'm having with this one is that I do feel like I have to be a lot more locked in when it comes to reading Dune, because I'll be reading and then when somebody starts speaking to me, it kind of just throws me out of the whole thing. And then I feel like the language gets a little bit more complex and the concepts get a little bit higher within Dune Messiah than they were even in the first book. So I do think there just has to be a certain level of me being entranced or whatever that word is, or basically just me being locked in. Like I said, I've really liked Dune Messiah. I think Paul's been a pretty fascinating character in this book. I still think that when it comes to the ending of the first book, Dune, I do think that the movies just did a much better job, especially with that final fight between Paul and Fade Rotha. And then getting into this one, I'm really curious on what Denis Villeneuve is going to do with Dune Messiah, because of course there's other characters that just, like Alia, she just doesn't have the characterization within the movies that she even had within the books, despite being, you know, a pretty essential character. So, and then what he did with Chani, I think that was a mistake. His characterization of Chani has been something that has been criticized pretty intensely by the fan base. And yeah, I think what he did just didn't make any sense. So I'm curious of what he's going to do with Chani's character. And reading this book just makes me a lot more excited for that movie that's going to come out. But of course, there is a reason that I wasn't able to finish that. And that's because I did get sort of locked in with The Prince of Thorns. I started this book and I slowly made my way through it. And then I was kind of like reading that and Dune Messiah at the same time. And I just got so much more just connected with this book because, of course, Jorg is just an awful character in terms of morals and whatnot. But I do think that he's a very fascinating character when it comes to his characterization. Like if we're going to compare the characterization of Jorg versus Paul, I think that Paul, when it comes to just his character, I don't want to say he is obviously the focus, but I do think that when it comes to other characters that I've read throughout fantasy, he just is, I think, a little bit more disappointing than I would think, because I really liked his character in the movies and they're kind of the same. But I feel like the characterization in the books is a little bit weaker. It's a little bit more focused on the concepts and the themes, especially the themes. And I do think that is a key aspect within sci-fi, so it does make a lot of sense. But I do think the characterization of Paul suffers for that. But in fantasy, the characters are often the main focus, or at least conduit for the theme. So I do think their characters do shine through a little bit more, and that is definitely the case with Jorg, a character where it feels like the entire premise of the story was, how do we make this main character as awful as possible while also giving him some sympathetic like a sympathetic backstory that does make his character a lot more complex than, you know, the first chapter would make the reader believe. And I do think that Mark Lawrence does a fantastic job when it comes to making that type of character. And I am curious of where the story is going to go in the future. I talked about it in a separate video, and he still has things he's got to accomplish, but the series has to round out with Jorg suffering the consequences of his actions. He is an awful person, and when it comes to just crafting a satisfying narrative, making Jorg suffer in the end and ultimately perish, I think will definitely be the more, I guess, positive ending, as funny as that sounds. But he needs to get his get backs, and then, you know, that karma has to blow back on him in the very end as well. Of course, that could not be the ending and it still end up being great, but that is kind of where my headspace is at when it comes to Jorg as a character. And then lastly, something completely different, separate from fantasy and sci-fi, is a nonfiction, and that is the Anglo-Saxons by Mark Morris. And I have been really enjoying this book. Whenever I grew up, I watched Vikings a lot. So I'm just a sucker for this period. But I grew up, and of course, the focus of that show is the Scandinavians, the Norsemen, the Northmen, the Vikings. And I never really paid too much attention to the Anglo-Saxon characters. Of course, there are some that really get your attention, characters like Egbert and Alfred. These characters, I do think, really draw the watcher in to that culture in a very different way than characters like Ragnar and like Ivar the Boneless later in the later seasons. But when it comes to just the story of the Anglo-Saxons, I had a lot of misunderstandings and just not any scope of understanding at all when it came to the Anglo-Saxons. Going into this book, I was like, I want to read about the native people of England in a way, and that is not what the Anglo-Saxons are. That is like pre-Roman Britons is what you're thinking of when you think of the natives, or the truth of the reality when it comes to the natives of England. That is not the Anglo-Saxons. They are invaders, funnily enough, in very similar way to what the Scandinavians are to them, or what the Normans are. And I think that is a very fascinating aspect to the history of England. Is just, it's all these people that come in and they conquer the land, completely changing it from what it was before. The Anglo-Saxons did that to the Britons, and of course the Normans did that to the Anglo-Saxons. And I'm not done with this. I think I'm on chapter 7, which it's after the rule of Aethelflaed, and I think it's Edward. And that was a very fascinating dynamic just because of the character of Aethelflaed, a woman in history who managed to just be a lot more commanding in her presence than I think her brother was, especially for the Mercians, who wanted independence from this whole idea of a united England. They did not want to be united under Edward, so they chose to prop up Aethelflaed, and then they would do the same with her daughter, even though that wouldn't end in the same way. But I have really enjoyed the Anglo-Saxon history, just a general view, and there's a couple of specific people throughout the Anglo-Saxon history that I do want to focus on, characters like Alfred, Aethelflaed, and I'm sure there's going to be more. Harold Hardrada for the Scandinavians, who is obviously not an Anglo-Saxon, but very interesting character. William the Conqueror is another one. So there's a lot of fascinating people to really gravitate towards in this book that I'm looking forward to learning a lot more about. But that is not all that I have been reading. I have been reading a lot more comics just because of the Absolute and Ultimate universes. And I've been locked into the Ultimate Universe for a while, since it began, because Jonathan Hickman is my favorite Marvel writer by a long shot. And when it came to this month, the only one that I've read from the Ultimate Universe, aside from rereading Ultimate Invasion, I think, is I did read the Ultimates this month. I think it could have been at the very beginning of this month or the very end of the last month. And I really enjoyed it. I think it's probably the best or second best title to come out of the Ultimate Universe, really just only battling with Ultimate Spider-Man. Ultimate Black Panther, I think, has been the most disappointing because it kind of sold itself as almost like a Wakandan Game of Thrones, and it just didn't really turn out to be that way at all. And maybe that is the fault of the expectations when it comes to the reader, but that's just kind of how I saw the series going, and it's not how it went at all. But when it comes to the Ultimates, there's a lot of political commentary that I think some people will either enjoy or not enjoy, depending on your political leaning. It is one of my favorites, like I said at the beginning, and Dennis Camp, when it comes to a person that stands in for Hickman, when it comes to a lot of the higher concept writing, I think he does a great job. And at first I was kind of bummed out that Jonathan Hickman wasn't doing the big Ultimate event that's coming up, but I think Dennis Camp, he is a very solid substitute, and I'm looking forward to seeing what he does. But overall, I've loved the Ultimates. I think that with the characterization of this universe's Doom, I think that really brings the team a very unique aspect, and I like how it plays on the former team of the Ultimates. I think that overall it just rounds out really well. And then there's the Absolute Trinity, Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman. I've really liked the Absolute Universe as well. I think when it comes to new jumping on points, the Absolute and Ultimate Universes do a fantastic job of this. When it comes to ranking the Absolute Trinity in terms of just how good these releases are, I would have to put Superman at the back. I haven't finished Absolute Superman. I think I'm about halfway through, and I'll finish it in this next upcoming month. So my opinion could change, but just with how it starts off, like, I really like the third issue. I think that is a positive look towards the later issues within the series, but it kind of starts off a little bit slower, where it's not getting in too much of the characterization of this new Superman or anything like that. It goes a lot more into the lore of Krypton and then his new status within this world as he gets to Earth a lot later in life. So I think there's a lot of interesting concepts within Absolute Superman, but the characterization of Superman, especially given the new movie, I think it's definitely a odd creative choice, because it's almost like we're going back to New 52 Superman in terms of tone, or Earth 1 Superman, two stories that I think that they're good, but it is an odd creative choice given how much people are leaning towards the more classical interpretation of Superman at the moment. And then, secondly, they're in second place is the absolute Batman, who I have enjoyed. Like, there's not a bad comic within any of the absolute or ultimate universes, despite how much I complained about Ultimate Black Panther just a second ago. I still like it a decent amount. It's just the worst of the bunch. But Absolute Batman, I think, has a lot of fun aspects to it. But I do think when it comes to that whole idea of like, oh, this is Batman, but he's broke. I mean, within the last couple of years of just regular, I think it's like Earth One is the technical term for that universe of Batman, the main continuity Batman. He's been broke. Like when it comes to this whole idea that he's got caves littered throughout the entire series instead or entire city instead of just having one big bat cave. That is a concept that we've seen done throughout, Tamaki's detective run because he was broke at that point. He had lost his fortune. He had lost his fortune. Nightwing had more money than he did. That is just the depth to which he was broke. Now he is technically more broke here, but it's not like you feel it. Like he is a little bit more creatively, like there's more of a creative touch to him because he's more limited in his finances. But like I said, this is nothing that's super new, especially with the recent years of what happened to Batman. But just generally, it's mostly the fact that he's bigger, actually. He's like 7 foot, he might be like 6'8" to like 7 foot tall. And I think that has been the funnest aspect, just how much bigger he is than everybody else. And I like the darker twist to Gotham as a whole. And specifically, this isn't a darker aspect, but having his friends be, the main villains that we know so much from the Batman mythos, characters like Two-Face, Crocodile, Penguin, Catwoman, having them be friends that he grew up with, I think was a really nice touch. And I liked that aspect a lot. And the fact that his mom is still alive, those are creative differences from the main universe that I have really enjoyed a lot more than the whole idea that he's broke, because like I said, you just don't feel it really. And then lastly is Absolute Wonder Woman. I have loved Absolute Wonder Woman so much. I think almost every issue has been near perfect. I think that the artistic choices, even the guy that substituted in where his art style was completely different than the first 5 issues, I think everything has worked out fantastically for Absolute Wonder Woman. The characterization of Diana, where she does feel in line with classic Diana, but it's just her situation is completely different. And I think that's where this whole idea of a new universe really works its best, is when the character stays true to that classic interpretation, but the situation is completely different. And that is how I feel about Absolute Wonder Woman. I think the whole more magical approach to her abilities is so much better than the idea that she's just another strong brawler with a lot more skill than Superman. Like, she has the brawling ability of a character like Superman because she is that strong, but she has the more technical skill, more leaning into the whole identity with Batman. Or not identity, but more leaning towards the side of Batman with her technical skills. And I like that this series is more than that. There's a lot more magic, and basically everything is Greek mythology related. And I thought I was done, but I just forgot that I read one more thing, Vagabond. I didn't read this whole deluxe edition. Instead, I just read the Miyamoto Village arc. There's 2 arcs within this first deluxe edition, and I haven't just wanted to go back to the second one because once I finished that second arc, I'm like, okay, now I gotta cop the new deluxe edition, which is the second one, and I'm just not ready to do that yet. I mean, I've read the series so many different times. It's not really a not ready, it's just I don't want to move that fast with this series. I want a more methodic breakdown, I guess. It's one of my favorite series to just break down from a storytelling perspective because this is the best manga ever made to me. It's my favorite. So yeah, the Miyamoto Village arc is a solid prologue. I don't think it's the best. I mean, I think there's better ones out there like Kingdom, Vinland Saga. Both of those have a better prologue arc. This prologue is a lot better than Berserk's prologue, but that's all kind of outside the point. I'm really excited for the series to get finished. Hopefully it stops The deluxe editions, they stop releasing with the farm arc unless Inoue decides he wants to finish the series. But the farm arc, I think, is a very good soft ending for Vagabond, so hopefully it stops there. But yeah, that is going to be pretty much it. I think I had a pretty solid reading month, and in the next video I'll talk about what I plan on reading in September.